we're going to talk about pipelines today, or me and Darin are going to try to answer all your questions about pipelines. That does not mean that it has to be about pipelines or pipelines. Some people do not understand what I mean by pipelines. CI/CD. But it can be anything else as well. So main topic, CI/CD, anything else goes. Now, before we jump into questions, let me just give a very brief 2-sentence overview of what I think by CI/CD pipelines. And if you disagree, and I know that many people do, then we can fight over it. That would be really cool. So CI means that you have a full automation of all the steps from pushing something to Git until we do not know when, right? We know where CI starts with a commit. We do not know where it ends. For some people, it ends when you build something. For others, when you release something. For third group of people, when you test something, and so on and so forth. CD, or continuous delivery, is the same thing, except that it ends when you have a production-ready release. Something that is ready to be deployed to production. The only reason why you're not deploying it to production is because usually there are business reasons, right? You don't want to. It's not that you cannot deploy it to production. And finally, continuous deployment means that you don't have that button deployed to production. Everything is fully automated. So CI/CD is a set of steps typically implemented through a pipeline. You have a pipeline tool, many in the market, that are orchestrating the steps. Hey, you do this, and then you do that, and then you do that, and so on and so forth until it is production ready if it's CD. Relatively simple to explain. Now, according to that explanation, ArgoCD is not CD. Flux CD is not CD. They are deployment tools. They are tools that allow us to deploy stuff and actually to manage the state of things, not even to deploy, to manage the state of things based on GitOps principles. So ArgoCD is not CD in my head, according to my description. It's just a marketing way to, I don't know, describe it, right? So that's my quick description of CI/CD. We can go deeper, just ask me questions. And ask us questions. I need to get used to saying ask us questions. Darin is here as well. There he is. So shoot questions.
Okay, so we already have some questions ahead of time. We have some questions coming in live. So we're going to sort of mix back and forth between the two. And let's go ahead and I'll start with one that was at the top, and it's already sort of been answered by somebody else, which we'll put the answer up to. When Helm is used within organization apps, should there be a single Helm chart or multiple? What day of the week is it?
I understand arguments for both. Now, of course, it could be one chart for multiple applications, assuming that those applications are the same. It could be one chart for multiple applications, even if they're not the same. But then I really don't like that solution, because that means that you have to put a lot of conditional logic. And those charts become nightmare to maintain, kind of like if-else statements. Oh, if it's stateful, then this. If it's stateless, is this, and so on and so forth. Personally, I prefer neither of the two. I prefer having a separate chart for each application. And I think that the cost of duplication is actually not as high as the cost of potential problem, because sooner or later you will have differences between the applications. Sooner or later, that's almost guaranteed that you're not going to have forever a certain number of applications that are all exactly the same. In general, I'm not against duplication, if that means clear separation, kind of like, hey, you can modify your chart without affecting me, type of solution.
Yeah. And Alan weighed into it, and Alan has been one of the guests on our podcast. You can have a single one. It's beneficial. In his case, all of his apps are the same. So he didn't need more than one.
What I would do in that case, in the case of what Aaron Barr is describing, I would still rather have a different chart for each application, and that chart can have the base chart as the dependency. To me, that's kind of easier to comprehend and understand. So you have no duplication. You can have 100%, 99% in that base chart. You just still create a new chart and say, hey, that base chart is the dependency.
Yeah. That way there's no question what is used for this application. So
yeah. And then you can play with things and say, hey, look, if you're introducing this new thing into the chart, it will be a new release of the base chart, and then we can either update all the charts that use that base chart, or we can just update one and see how it goes, and then do gradual rollout of that something new, whatever that new is.
Yep. And let's go and remind people too, since you are in a hotel, you don't have all your cool set up. If people send in super chats today, we'll have to chase them down because we don't have all the automations in place.
Yes. I did not set it up, so but do send the super chats and join the channel, please, and likes and all those things. Do all those things. That helps really a lot. We just cannot. I don't know whether we can display it on the screen, but we might miss some. Let's say.
Yeah,
we
can catch them up. But then I just have to get it there. So if you send in a super chat and you're saying, "Why aren't you acknowledging me?" Just give us a couple minutes because I'm having to scroll through and find it. So, all right. So let's move on to the next question. I had a discussion with another DevOps today, and in my view, a chart, and this we're still going on here, versus a single chart for everything. Okay, so
yeah,
same thing. Okay, so this is funny. I talked this afternoon, and
we met like 4 hours ago, something like that, at the conference.
Oh, okay, very interesting. All right, so what would be a good approach to start applying GitOps concepts? Now, let's stop there for just a second. GitOps is a very contentious phrase right now. And you've defined what GitOps is. And on tomorrow's...
defined what CI/CD is.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, correct. You did not go the other way. You have in the past defined what GitOps is.
Yes.
On tomorrow's live stream over on the DevOps Paradox channel, we're going to be talking about the latest 1.0 GitOps definition.
Oh,
so
good.
Join us tomorrow if you want to talk more about GitOps and where that's headed. So let's just
we need to create a banner for DevOps Paradox so people know where to join.
Okay. Just you talk and I can create stuff in
one day.
Minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, start applying GitOps principles in a company that already uses Kubernetes and CI/CD pipelines. Where to start?
Okay. So I'm going to skip the obvious things that apply to absolutely everything, meaning that start small, pick one application, don't go for everything, and all that jazz, right? The things that you already know. And specifically, it's actually straightforward, or not, depending on how you define it. I will assume for a second that you already played with ArgoCD or Flux, completely independently of CI/CD pipelines, that you understand how it works, that you set up your repo and all those things, that you made GitOps work completely outside of pipelines. If you did, then it's really easy and straightforward. All you have to do is remove from the pipeline the part where you do kubectl apply or Helm this or whatever you're doing, customize that. And just clone the code of the repo where manifests are. Use sed to replace the tag of the old tag with the new tag. Push it back. That's all there is. Clone, sed command, commit push. Now you can use image updater, or also if you're using Kustomize, for example, instead of Helm or directly kubectl, there is a command for that, so it doesn't have to be sed, but the point is clone, change the tag in a manifest, push. It's relatively straightforward.
Pretty easy. But again, join us tomorrow because we're going to be talking about what's coming out of now what is defined as GitOps, truly defined. It's going to be shocking to a lot of people. It's not shocking to a lot of us, though. Let's go ahead and go over to one of our pre-submitted questions. This is from Chris. And for people, when I call out the questions, by the way, if I don't say your name, it's because I don't want to butcher your name. So if I can't say your name, I'm just not even going to try, and I apologize in advance. So, okay. But I can say Chris. unless this really isn't Chris, and then I'm really messed up. How would you build and deploy in a company with teams? Should each team develop their own pipelines, A, or B, is it a good idea to create a platform team that provides the pipelines as a service to developers? I have an opinion on this.
You go first, and then I'll go if I don't agree.
Okay. It should be it depends on the size of the company, number one. If there are only 2 teams in the company, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If there are multiple teams within a company, large organization, enterprise type size, it should be a central team doing that. But not because they are the ones on the hook for defining what the pipeline is. They're the ones providing a service of the pipeline, because they're going to be able to have the hooks to all the tooling that's necessary. If not, they are working closely with those people, meaning infrastructure, security, all of those things on a day-to-day basis. That would be the service. If, as a team, you're having to start building all of that out, number one, all of those other teams that are around you are going to get fed up talking with all the other teams. So the security and infrastructure team, they're going to get fed up. And they're just going to want to talk to one person or one team. You get a lot more velocity that way using a buzzword, I think, in my opinion. So that's where I'm not opposed to the other one. And it doesn't mean that the other one doesn't happen. But if I have 5 teams that are all basically creating container images that are going to be deployed to Kubernetes, those 5 teams shouldn't be creating their own pipelines. Your turn.
Yeah, something similar, right? I see it similar, like, let's say, development of applications. If you develop applications in a company that has more than 100 people or something like that, you will still be writing the code of your applications. What you will not be doing is reinventing the way how applications are logging, how they are sending metrics somewhere, and so on and so forth. So there is a team, usually, especially in bigger companies, that creates shared libraries for your applications. And then you are focused when developing your application on what matters for that application, what is unique for that application. I think same thing goes for, and you have freedom to be in that area, right? I think the same thing works well with pipelines. If it's a bigger organization, there should be a team that creates shared libraries. And I'm using that term loosely, depends from technology, right? Shared components. And once those components are created, no matter which way you organize things, you always need those. And then you either say, hey, you start from scratch a pipeline, but realistically your pipeline can be as simple as 5 lines of something that invokes those shared, kind of like, hey, this is what you invoke when you want to build your application. This is what you invoke when you want to deploy your application. So you assemble those certain number of steps, usually very short pipeline, or that same team that created shared libraries will create the initial pipeline for you, right? I'm still very much in favor that you have certain level of control of that pipeline. There might be things that you have to run because of policies or what's not, but you can choose and say, hey, 99% of that or 80% or 70% fits my use case, but I have this something that is specific to me. And then you actually spend most of the time developing or writing the part of the pipeline that is specific to your team, to your application, what's not. So I'm a huge favor of shared libraries and freedom to invoke those libraries.
Yeah, and I'm on the opposite end of that to an extent. I'm thinking more governance, compliance, ruling with an iron fist type level. But that's just who I deal with most of the time. And for people that think that they need to do that themselves, that's just not a tax that you want to pay, in my opinion.
Yeah, those things should exactly be, but doesn't those things come into the domain of shared libraries? Kind of like we need to do this security scanning, right?
Right.
The major challenge would be whether you don't have a say whether that will be in a pipeline. Or if you do, then it's a bit more complicated for those teams, because those teams have to figure out that you are actually not that you chose to skip invoking security scanning, which is a more complicated kind of approach.
Right. So the way I like to see them when I'm creating pipelines, no matter what the tooling may be, is I've got the pipeline. And it's not one pipeline to rule them all, number one. I've got pipelines that are for things, whatever those things are. I'm building a node app. I'm just building a container image. I'm building a war file, whatever, the standard, just go pick this one off the shelf and use this one. But at the certain points along that pipe, there are places to where you can inject pre and post things, if you will, to where you could extend into that pipeline or expand on that pipeline. That's completely okay. If everything's, so going back to your 5-line example, if all I need to do is give it 5 variables and that's my full pipeline and I'm good with the whole thing as it's defined, done, right? Nothing else to worry about. But having those extension points are useful, but I wouldn't try to come up with extension points day one. If you're that shared services team that's trying to create these things, think about it, right? Just sort of think, okay, pre and post, where would these make sense? But there are going to be points, going back to the security scan, that should not be opted out of ever, period, right? Especially in this day and age. It's just, I don't want to do a security scan because it takes 2 hours. Tough. I mean, that's not your decision to make. That's a company decision that's been made for you.
Yes. And in that case, kind of like, if possible, maybe that even shouldn't be in a pipeline visible. Kind of like, hey,
right,
it's hidden somewhere, and we just know that, hey, at this point, there will be security scanning. There is no need even, ideally, to even write it in, to have it in a pipeline. Kind of like, just happens as a result of something, whatever the technology you're using.
Exactly. One thing I want to call out is, in today's stream, we're not going to be doing deep dives into any tooling. So some of the questions we will be just skipping over completely. All the questions are being captured, so they may come up as a separate video that Victor does over on DevOps Toolkit, or maybe somewhere else that we talk about it. But in this specific stream, we're not going to be saying which one is better, this or that. We're just not going there. That would end up in number one, I work for a vendor, so that's a line that I don't like crossing. And Victor also works for a vendor that is on sort of the far right-hand side, if you will, of a pipeline. Would you say that?
Exactly.
So it's like we don't want to go down that path, because that's no good for anybody. The one thing that I will say, and in fact, I'm going to go ahead and pull up this question that you and I talked about offline first. This was sent in earlier from Raleigh. What is the best CI/CD tool? We're planning on doing this one last, but now's a good time to talk about it. It's the one that you use. That's the best one. Right? It's
to me, a more significant question is, what is the best tool that is used by I'm going to call those CI/CD tools pipeline tools. Really, the real question is, what are you wrapping with your pipeline tools, rather than pipeline tool itself? So I don't know, what are you using for testing, right? So it's kind of, when you say best CI/CD tool, that would be maybe pipeline tool, but what really matters is what are you invoking with those pipelines? Because your pipelines are not going to do the work. They're scheduling and orchestrating the work of other tools, even though it might not look like that always.
Correct. And if you are creating your pipelines in such a way that your pipeline is doing the work, forgive me, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
That you're asking for a lot of trouble.
I like to, when people ask me, and this is, if I would rephrase the previous question, how do you start with GitOps? If I would say, how do you start with CI/CD pipelines? I would say by ignoring pipelines. You don't start with pipelines. You end with pipelines. You do your automation, whether you're doing it in shell script, in Bash, in Python, in Go, doesn't matter. You do all your automation. You do all the individual phases of the process. And then you say, okay, now I know what I'm doing. Now this is what I execute to build containers. This is what I execute to run tests. This is what I do here. This is what I do that. When you have all that, then you go to your pipeline tool of choice and say, okay, now that I have everything finished, you're going to orchestrate all that, but you're going to execute this, and then you're going to execute those two things in parallel, and you're going to fail under those conditions, and so on and so forth. So pipelines are orchestrators of the phases or steps in CI/CD process.
Yeah, and you were just
Does that make sense?
It makes a total sense. And what you were just calling out there is you're doing your discovery first. You're figuring out, okay, what SCM am I using? What is going to be the deploy target for the source code that's setting over in my SCM, right? You figure out what's my input and where's the landing place. Everything else in the middle actually doesn't matter, right? I mean, it matters, right? I will say it does matter. But at the end of the day, you're trying to get your source code deployed. So and if you're using PHP, or maybe you've just created flat HTML files, so no pre-processing, no nothing else, maybe that's it, right? It's going to be checkout rsync. And that may be your whole pipe, if things were only that simple nowadays. But it really does boil down to that.
You can also, I think you can phrase it in a different way to say most of the CI/CD pipeline, you should be able to execute most of the steps in a CI/CD pipeline long before you reach CI/CD pipeline, right? When you're developing, you need to run tests, right? Maybe not all the tests that you will run in CI/CD pipeline, but you need to run maybe fraction of tests, maybe majority, maybe all. You need to be able to build your container or binary or what's not, right? So significant part of CI/CD pipeline you need to execute before you reach CI/CD, right? Before you commit something to a Git repository. And that means that if you're not thinking about all those steps, all those phases outside of pipelines and then just orchestrating them with pipelines, then you will have to have duplication. Then you would have same thing written in a pipeline way, whatever that is, and then again, same thing locally. And that's not a good idea.
And I could spend hours talking about just this one subject alone, and you would be bored. So let's go back to another question. Again, I'm just going to sort of jump down here to next one from George. And I'm going to pull this one in, even though it's tool specific, but it's an interesting problem to solve because this isn't just an ArgoCD problem. This is an across the board if you're following this model. How can I copy configurations from the staging Git repositories to fill in the blank repository, assuming you're following some pattern where you're moving from left to right? So dev, QA, stage, load testing, prod, whatever it is. So how do you do that? What's the right process in doing that?
Depends how you organize things. If you organize it as if staging and production, I'm going to limit to staging and production, even though you can have any number of environments. If the manifest for staging and production with all the configs and stuff like that are completely separate, then you're in trouble. Now, if they're all having only the things that are specific to those environments, so let's say that staging, here is production, and they're all pointing to the base manifest here, right? Staging, production. And have only the things that are specific to those environments, like host name, right? The address. Then there is nothing to copy, right? You're just pointing. Staging goes to this specific release. Production goes to this specific release, which can be the same or different depending in which phases you are. And you just need to have staging specific or production specific things, which should be very few in number. And in that case, there is nothing to copy. It's just you're updating the base manifest.
Yep. Keep everything just environmental. If you can get things environmental from day one, your life's going to be a lot simpler.
Oh yeah,
I think a lot simpler. Let's go ahead and go. I think this was the one I was going to. Yes. Again, something over Helm chart. In your opinion, what's the advantages, and this is from Ahmed, and disadvantages of Helm file? In which use cases do you recommend Helm file over normal Helm charts?
If you asked me that question maybe 2 years ago, I would give you a different answer than I'm going to give it today. Today, I see no advantages of Helm file. I think that ArgoCD and Flux completely replace Helm file. I think that that's it. Kind of, they're replacing it.
Okay.
They're not the same, just to clarify. I'm not saying Helm file, ArgoCD are the same. But once you start using ArgoCD or Flux or any other GitOps tool, there is no point in Helm file.
Right. Okay. From this one, I can say, MadClown50. MadClown50. What would you recommend, or would you recommend using Kaniko to build containers on Kubernetes? What alternatives are there? You have a few videos on this.
Yeah, my preference goes for kaniko. There are other solutions. I recommend kaniko. EMG is there. What else? BuildX is there.
Builda.
Builda as well. I'm not sure whether Builda. It's been a long time. I'm not sure whether it works in Kubernetes alone without really connecting to the daemon on the host.
Yeah, I can't
I'm not sure about Builda. BuildX, for example, surprised me the other day. I know that in the past it required Docker. Now it doesn't. Now it works in a container directly, as far as I know. I still have some tests to do, so that might be an option today. But until further notice, my recommendation is Kaniko.
Okay. Let's see here. Let's do this one. Is it a good idea to combine Helm and Kustomize together with fill in the blank? He's asking Flux, but this could go for anything else. Yeah.
Combine, like kind of package Kustomize inside of Helm. I wouldn't do that.
No.
I don't think it's a good idea. They are more like parallel than complementary. And now, of course, there are things in Helm that Kustomize doesn't do and vice versa, but I wouldn't combine them. Now, if your question is whether to put Kustomize instead of Helm, I wouldn't do that. Now, if your question is, hey, is it okay to combine them in terms that something is defined as Helm and something else is defined as Kustomize? Like, I don't know, I'm using Helm to deploy Prometheus and I'm using Kustomize for my application. That's perfectly fine. That's great. I'm combining it all the time. In that sense, not kind of combining it for the same application, but combining it that I have in a system both, then yes.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, gee whiz. All right, back to MadClown50. Thank you. What's the best way to manage semantic versioning of container tags? Don't use them. I know it's good to. I like it. Kind of, I like that there is a clear relation between version of a release and the container tag. So kind of, if I have release 1.7.5, it's nice to be able to track that. Say, okay, so the container image should be the same tag, right? Why not? I like that. Now, how to tag it, that really depends mostly on. There are a couple of applications out there. I mean, small binaries that you use to just that go into your Git repository, typically GitHub. Check out the latest release over there or latest Git tag and increment it, unless you say otherwise. Also, many of the pipeline tools also have it incorporated there, so you can either use a standalone binary or pick and choose the plugin add-on, whatever the pipeline tools are doing to do that. It's not a big thing. You can even write one yourself probably in a day. It's relatively straightforward. Yeah, that goes back to what you were talking about earlier. Before actually creating the pipeline, create the bits and pieces that you need for what you're going to be using. And one of those things may be semantic versioning, because talk about a religious war. Semantic versioning means a lot of different things to everybody, which it shouldn't since it's semantic. But,
yeah, but
Well, I'm just saying, and the follow-on question, which I'm going to put up here, they were talking about, okay, how do you do image tagging within a Jenkins pipeline? This is the same type issue here. Figure out what you want your tagging to be. And if you're working in a team and you've got a shared services team, you might want to check with them because they may have already built it for you. Going back to things may already be created that you just don't know about. So instead of actually looking at the internet for the first answers, look within the company first. And then if there's nothing there, then go somewhere else. Because if it's already a standard within your company, even if it's against what the internet says, nobody ever does anything within a company against the internet, right? Then, go with what's there. Because when you leave the company, when you decide to leave on your own will or not leave on your own will, whichever the case may be, the people left behind can still understand what's going on. Standards are a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
But the standards within the company are more important than the standards outside of the company.
The only thing I would add that to me, versioning is one of those things that actually defy what I said before. When I said, hey, you should do all those things outside of pipelines. Like for versioning, if it exists only in pipelines, I'm fine. I do not need to run it on my laptop. I will never make a release from my laptop. So for example, that be existing only in some pipeline type of library is perfectly fine.
I'm in complete disagreement with you on that one.
Yeah?
Complete, yes.
Okay.
Because here's the reason why. If within an organization, we have decided, the company, the architecture team has decided there is a standard way that we are going to version everything within the company, then I would not put it in the pipeline. It should be a standalone binary that everybody can use, and it just shows up in the pipeline. Now, could it be buried in that shared library? Absolutely. But the implementation detail of it is the standalone that does the thing by itself.
Oh yeah.
Right,
I
that's
meant
what I'm
like
getting
kind
at.
of if you never find out how to run that binary outside of pipelines,
Doesn't matter.
wouldn't matter. Exactly. That's what I meant.
But the implementation detail of it does matter. Because what you don't want to do is, let's put it this way. I'll use the two that I use the most: Jenkins and GitHub Actions. If I wrote inside of a Jenkins pipeline within a shared library of Jenkins a very specific way to do versioning, and it was buried within that shared library and written in scripted syntax, I would not be able to take my versioning process from Jenkins and drop it into GitHub Actions. Just wouldn't work. I would have to rewrite it for GitHub Actions. Whereas, if I would have written that as a standalone Go binary, whatever, I was just calling it from Jenkins, I could have easily just take that over to GitHub Actions as well and just call it the exact same way. Call it differently. It's wrapped differently, if you will. But at the center of that nice gooey piece of chocolate that I'm getting ready to eat after we're done today, it's the same thing. That's all I'm saying. That's the detail.
The worst thing is that it wouldn't take you, if such a thing does not already exist, it wouldn't take you any more time to write it in something else. Shell, Go, Python, whatever. So you're not saving effort by doing what you just said that you shouldn't be doing. So kind of there is no good reason to do it in the first place. It's not really easier to write it pipeline only way than any other way.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to this one, and then we'll go to a submitted one. What's your opinion about using Kustomize and image promotion on different environments until prod?
I like Kustomize. I think that everybody should use Kustomize for their applications. I don't think that Kustomize is good for third-party apps because Helm shines by allowing you many more permutations and ways to customize the outcome of something, but our applications do not need 50,000 permutations like public third-party apps, and for them I prefer Kustomize. Now, on different environments until prod, yes. I kind of like, you have typically overlays directory and then production and overlays staging, overlays this, overlays that, and I use all the time Kustomize edit image in a specific directory or specific environment to modify what that image is. unless I'm using ArgoCD, and in case of ArgoCD, I'm not doing that. I'm modifying ArgoCD manifest instead.
Okay.
Or Flux.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. Okay. From Paolo, the concept of deployment pipeline, big air quotes, right? But pipeline, as introduced in the continuous delivery book. I still have mine. I should have brought it in today. By the way, by Humble and Farley, Dave Farley actually just released a new version of that, not of that book specifically, but goes through the pipeline. It's on LeanPub. If you haven't picked it up, you should, because Dave self-published it. Go give him some money. What's the best way to implement the deployment pipeline when it comes to microservices, Kubernetes? Is the answer GitOps?
So let me ignore at the beginning GitOps word first from that story. I think that from pipeline perspective, there is no significant difference whether it's microservices, Kubernetes, or not microservices, not Kubernetes. You have certain steps that you need to do. You need to build your stuff, you need to run tests, you need to deploy somewhere, and so on and so forth. So it's all the same. Now, tooling is, of course, different. Kind of like if it's Kubernetes, then you're using kubectl something, or Helm something, or Kustomize something. If it's not Kubernetes, then you're SSHing in some server and copying files there, right? So, of course, it's different. The steps are different. But conceptually, I'm kind of like using, hanging on to the word concept is the same. I think that what we need to do did not change conceptually did not change with the introduction of Kubernetes. Now, GitOps does change the story. And it doesn't change the story much. It just replaces kubectl or /SSH / whatever you're doing to deploy imperatively before by you doing what I mentioned at the very beginning. You clone the repo with the manifest, you modify the manifest, you push back. So that's the change that GitOps introduced. And now I'm intentionally ignoring the fact that you might actually use a tool that will do the same thing for you, like ArgoCD image updater. But that ArgoCD image updater is still doing the same thing. It is cloning the things, the repo, modifying something and pushing back. So it just if you use tooling to do that, you're just using tools that are going to do exactly the same. Clone the repo, change the tag, push back. That's the change that GitOps introduced. Actually, there is one more, and this is a big one. Important one. If you're using GitOps without accessing the cluster to do those things as you should, then you do not know when your applications are deployed. And now when I think about it, that's a huge change. That really means that all the steps you do before the steps that you were doing in the past until you reach deployment, they stay the same. The steps after deployment stays the same. The deployment itself is slightly different, clone the code and stuff like that. But here's the problem. You cannot have it as one pipeline anymore. You need to figure out the events. So you cannot have one pipeline because you're not deploying imperatively anymore. You're modifying Git repo and you do not know when will that application be up and running. And the best strategy there is to stop the first pipeline when you did the modification of the Git repo, and that's it, pipeline finished. And then you have some process, something in your cluster that will trigger another pipeline, a different pipeline, depending on technology, when the deployment inside of the cluster is finished, and then do the second half or the other half or the other part of the pipeline. So you split the pipeline in two. The second pipeline triggered as a result of you detecting that inside of the cluster that something changed. That's the biggest change, I think. And I think that we will see that change. I think that we will see that more and more. Pipelines are still conceptually the same, but we as users of those pipelines, architects of those pipelines, so not the technology itself, but we as users will be splitting pipelines more and more and initiating them depending on something happening somewhere. Oh, some image was pushed to this registry, let me run this pipeline, right? So technology the same. There is no need not ask anything extra from pipeline tooling. I just ask extra from you, dear users, to actually split them up and fire them depending on events happening somewhere.
I think the key part there is moving away from a full end-to-end physical pipeline to and changing that, even though all the points along the map are still the same, but breaking that up into now a logical pipeline instead of actual physical pipeline. And there's
Correct.
points to where you are cool for doing everything imperative, completely blocking, doing everything else. But in your example, at some point, things become event-based. And that's still your pipeline. But it's breaking apart. I wish there was a better way to say it. Because the pipeline is still the pipeline. But the physical implementation of it may not be a pipeline. It's maybe workflows that come together or whatever. The pipeline is the pipeline, right? Because that gets you from inside to the end. It's sort of like
The process is the
tunnels.
same, right?
The process is
build,
exactly the
test,
same. Yeah.
Good example, just for a second, good example, just to kind of, to me that makes it easier to picture is canary deployments. Let's say that you want to do something after the deployment, whatever that something is. You have canary deployments that take 5 hours. Are you going to block your pipeline for 5 hours waiting for canary to finish?
You shouldn't.
No.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you, to me, the simplest thing when it comes to a pipeline is there's really two. I really think about it, two physicals. I have something that's taking my source code and packaging it. And that package is stored in somewhere. Whether that's a binary repository or just plain disk. Who cares? That's the package that's going to be deployed. And then I've got a second pipeline that's taking that package and deploying it to said environment. And that's it, right? So that's the way I always sort of, those are my three basic drop points. Raw source, binary repository, running environment, whatever that is. And everything else is cake beyond that to me. Because if I had that monolithic pipeline and my deploy failed, I'd have to run my pipeline again in order to get it to deploy. I don't want to do that. I've already got the binary I want to run. So that's let's move on because we're already 45 minutes in. Holy cow. And you're muted right now. So okay. And this I think goes on to what we were just talking about. Is it possible to achieve complete CI/CD in GitOps, including multiple testing, promotion between environments, etc.? And I believe the answer is, I believe you could do true continuous deployment in multiple environments and full testing, but it's going to you're going to have to make sure that none of those events are ever dropped, because that will be the only way it would happen.
Yeah, and I think it's very important. There's products put acronyms where they shouldn't. I think that I'm repeating myself over and over again, but having CD word in Argo and Flux is really damaging. In the GitOps world, GitOps is replacing only the deployment part of CI/CD. Period. Everything else stays the same. Except maybe you're breaking pipelines into smaller pieces, but still, it's conceptually same pipelines. Maybe they're broken, but that's it.
Yep. So, and this is the case where we'd see in the past, where you had that one pipeline, one physical pipeline, when you were deploying to VMs, and you've moved to Kubernetes now. Could you still do that? Absolutely, right? Helm update. Is that the right thing to do? Right is very dependent on your environment.
It's also, there is nothing wrong with having GitOps for some environments and imperative for others. Kind of like, for example, let's say that you want to create a preview environment, something fast on pull request. And you might have as many preview environments as pull requests. Just keep GitOps. Why GitOps? That's temporary. I don't care about it. I mean, I do care about it, but it's not something that I want to track and stuff like that. Just do kubectl apply. And then do clone the repo, GitOps, all the stuff for staging or production, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, some of these we've already answered, so I'm going to jump over to these here. This one looks pretty good. From Juan, Hola Viktor, I need you to come to Valencia. Do we just need to stop right there? I need you to come to Valencia. Is that good enough?
Okay.
I don't know where Valencia
I can come
is.
to Valencia.
Okay.
It's a train ride from me. It's close.
All right.
I'm in Barcelona, Juan. You probably know that, but hey, just in case.
Okay, so let's get on. So help me convince my CIO and fellow IT managers that this DevOps business thing is pretty much the way to go forward. By the way, it was the way to go forward over 10 years ago. Is that something you do?
I do not do that as paid engagement. In terms like kind of you pay me money, I come and do that. There are a couple of ways we can do that, and you're not going to have to pay anything. If there is a conference, meetup, something in Valencia, I come and then use that opportunity to come to your company for a day or something like that. So I just need the excuse to come to Valencia. That's all. Conference or show interest in Crossplane, then Upbound will send me there, right?
Okay. All right. From Jivaden, what is DevSecOps beyond the buzzword? I wish we had Patrick here.
Yeah. Personally, I don't like DevSecOps because that never ends, as if security is not part of operations. Of course it is. The same thing is I don't like DevTestOps or DevTestSecOps or whatever variations of we want to put. DevOps is about different groups of people working together. It's called DevOps because it started with development and operations, but nobody said that testers shouldn't be included in DevOps, just as nobody said ever that Sec shouldn't be involved in DevOps. And if we need explicitly to mention Sec, then I think that we need to explicitly mention test and a bunch of other groups, managers. So let's say testers, we need to include them. We need to include managers. What else, Darren? Give me one more example.
Compliance.
Shared compliance. So dev, manager, compliance, SecOps.
Legal? They can't
Legal,
be left
exactly. So simply, we need to figure out how different departments can work together. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. This is interesting. I'm going to put this one up because I don't think we've answered this. So can we use fill-in-the-blank tools for deployments in Kubernetes clusters which don't have access to Git type repositories?
No.
No. I mean, today it's Git or nothing, right?
So first of all, I'm not sure that what does it mean Git type repositories. I will assume that means not Git, but repositories.
Right, like you're still using Subversion or Perforce or fill in the blank.
You can do it. You just need to write the GitOps operator. Because nobody else will do it. Nobody, no company will write GitOps operator for SVN simply because.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
Okay, so again, I'm going to skip over some of these that are very tool specific. Let's see. Oh, okay. Let's do this one. We've talked about it from Rob. Come on, Rob. There we go. I love links. Where should environment-specific configurations be stored?
Personally, and ignoring the existence of ArgoCD image updater, I think it should be stored in its own repository, or at least in its own directory in environment repository. That's second option. I don't like storing it in application repo because I see environment as being one entity.
I agree. Now, let's go back to your answer there. You said you would prefer a standalone repository, and failing that, you would have an environmental repository that would have folders that have whatever. So 4, 6 folders, whatever it is. why would you pick one over the other?
My brain functions like, where is production? This repo. Not this repo, this directory.
Right.
It's easier for me to comprehend it like that, to organize it like that. But it's almost the same as directories, because one of the big things is that with GitOps, you're not notifying anybody. So your webhooks are not firing like, hey, I just modified this repository, fire this webhook so that pipeline or some other type of tool can do something. And then that tool cannot figure out, so what did you change in this repo? Was it this directory or that directory, right? So if it would be pipelines instead of GitOps, I would say without hesitation, different repo. No hesitation, different repo without any doubt. But since the GitOps tools are always pulling specific repo and specific directory, directories are okay as well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just thinking beyond the point of you're still working in an environment that is not using GitOps, but you want to be able to be environmental, then to me, it's the separate repository that makes better sense, because it's
no doubt.
There's no magic
do not even
at that point.
Think of it for a second. Not even for a second. Different repo in that case.
The argument will be, well, we don't want to have that many repositories.
Yeah, but you also don't want to have that much logic to figure out where it comes from.
Exactly.
Either.
When you can have a one-to-one mapping for anything, your life becomes tremendously easier. Are you going to have more things? Yes. Is that okay? In my opinion, it's the right way to do it. The other way is it's suboptimal, because you're going to have to write the logic to figure out what's going to happen on the things, whatever that thing is.
And then we end with those questions like, hey, no, let's say those people cannot access production, therefore they should not be able, they cannot access staging either, because we keep it in same repo, for example.
Exactly.
You have access control issues automatically.
Yeah. And it's a whole lot easier to lock down a repository than it is a folder within a repository. It's just...
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you've got it automated to where you can ACL that folder, great, go for it. But if I was an auditor, that would be one of the first things I would complain about, even if it's there.
If you want to in majority of cases, I see no reason to create a pull request when you want to change something to staging. In majority of cases. Why would you do that? You just want to apply those changes to staging. But you do want to create a pull request to apply changes to production, right? Maybe not in all cases, but let's say that's a viable scenario, right? That I can imagine many are using. And all of a sudden you have issues doing such a simple operation if you have the same repository.
Right. Let's move on to another question here. We're almost at the end. Although you've already had the video, I'm still wondering if there's any architectural differences or use case differences between Argo Workflow and Tekton pipelines.
Not substantial, really. I think it's like, to me, Argo Workflows and Tekton remind me of the Cold War we had in 60s or 70s, right? The moment one side figures out something, the other one copies it, and then vice versa. They're very similar. Of course, it's not the same code base. It's a different code and stuff like that. But there are no significant differences as far as I know, except that Argo Workflows is part of the Argo project. So there is events, for example. That would be a difference, but it's not really Argo Workflows specifically.
Right. Okay. So which benefits do you find in building images inside Kubernetes versus just building them outside?
I think building it with GitHub Actions is great. Just do it. I see no reason not to do it. What I do see a reason is having your own dedicated. So I will always redirect people to use a service for something, right? So whatever you can do outside of your cluster as a service, do it. Now, when you do need to do it in your own infrastructure, it doesn't matter whether it's on-prem or your own servers in AWS, I simply do not want to have a dedicated server for Docker for building images. That is either doing nothing at times and wasting money, or at times not being able to do everything it needs to do. That's why we have Kubernetes, right? But it's kind of almost unfair question. Kind of why would you do it in Kubernetes would be a valid question instead of Docker running yourself or something like in that direction. If it's Kubernetes versus using it as a service, just do it.
Okay. I'm not as harsh on that. If I only have one machine sitting around, I'm paying $20 or $30 a month. I'm not going to worry about it too much. It's sort of like having a Mac, right? If I'm building an iOS app, I got to have a Mac. So in that case, if you have something laying around that's also a sort of single-use tool, like a Mac, maybe that also becomes your container image builder too, just because, right?
Oh yeah, if you have a server that is already dedicated to it, don't go out of your way to move it to Kubernetes. I mean, it's doing it. I mean, heck, I'm telling people don't go out of way moving away from mainframe. So I'm definitely not going to say decommission that cluster that is not costing you anything. That server, sorry, that is not costing you anything or is very cheap. Use it, why not?
Okay. From Code Coffee, what about taking versions from package management and Git plus Git hash?
I'm not sure about the package management. I
wonder if this is the tagging.
It's kind of versioning, probably.
Yeah,
kind
it feels like the tagging.
Is the question, maybe clarify Code Coffee, is the question to simply tag things, whatever those things are, with Git hashes? Great, do it. I personally don't like it because then kind of like, okay, so what are we running now? Kind of, okay, something is going on in production. Which release are we running? And then it starts kind of like never-ending story with a hash. To me, it's simply easier to say, we have a problem in production. It's 1.5.7. I know what it is. It's easier for me to find. But yeah, hashes are fine. Especially if you're doing... Now, the one place where actually hashes are better than, let's say, semantic versioning is that if you're really doing things well and you're deploying... First of all, you're not providing software... You're not a software vendor, but just deploying to production. And you're doing multiple times a day. Like many times a day, then go with hash, because then you stop caring about specific versions anyway.
Yeah, or machine readable. I think I would trust a hash over a version that I gave it, because versions can be reused. A hash can't.
Yeah, so kind of don't type yourself. This is the tag. This is the version. Don't do that. Now, if it's generated by some process. Both are equally reliable.
Yeah. I think this might be the last one we have to take due to timing. From Matt, how should infrastructure as code be included in a pipeline?
By executing Terraform apply.
Well, okay. Let me ask it in the way that I was thinking. If I have infrastructure that's necessary for my application, where would I keep that Terraform definition, that Pulumi definition? Does that go in with my application code? Is it a separate repository?
If it's infrastructure for a specific application in the repo of application, it's just that I almost never see that. So maybe if you're talking about Lambda, for example, or something like that, yeah, maybe. Or Heroku, maybe. But there is not much infrastructure, if any, to set up. But in most cases, infrastructure is shared across applications. And then it goes back to that logic I had before, kind of like, hey, production is a separate entity, it's a separate repository for GitOps, and I think that includes also infrastructure. Like, so if it's not shared, if it's for one application only, keep it in where the application is. If it's shared across applications, then it becomes an entity in itself.
Okay. And I think for timing wise, because you have to get ready. Oh wait. Why is that still there? Okay. You have to get ready to go back to your event. So I want to make sure that you get there in plenty of time. I'm going to let you wrap it up. I will say before I go that DevOps Paradox live tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. CET. So hopefully Victor will be back from where he's at right now and back at his house, hopefully, because that's how I'm going to schedule it. And
I might have a call from a restaurant on a highway, but I will be there.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So with that, I will say goodbye. Victor, I'll let you finish this one up.
not much to say. Just if you didn't bump the like button and the subscribe button, do it. Doesn't cost anything. And if you want to be really supportive, then join the channel. It helps a lot, really. Thank you so much for watching.